All right, what's up, everybody? Okay, so Maxine Waters, the congresswoman from California, the Democrat, we all know who she is, recently came out and said that there was never a realistic strategic plan to impeach Trump. I guess she's saying that the political hacks didn't get together, sit down, and come up with a plan to impeach him. It's like, well, you didn't have to. You were on Twitter every day of the week talking about impeachment. You were all over the news media, and giving speeches talking about impeaching him. I mean, Talib, whatever the hell her name is, from Michigan, the congresswoman, the freshman congresswoman, at her speech, she was like, we're going to impeach the motherfucker, and all kinds of other nonsense. I mean, this is how a congresswoman speaks, right? But you can't hold her to it because, she's a woman of color who's also Muslim, so she has 3 oppression points, to check, so nobody will call her out on that because they're afraid to death of what's going to happen. They don't want to be called racist or sexist or Islamophobic. Nobody will call Maxine Waters out either because she's a black woman. She has 2 oppression points, so you got to be very careful with calling these people out because you don't want to be called a bigot in any way, shape, or form. So according to Maxine, Mad Maxine, there was no plan to impeach Trump. That they didn't. But then she also said it was only a few of them. So it's like, which one? Was there not a plan, or only a few people sat down to put a plan together? She's kind of a little contradicting herself. She also said something about that Trump says there's no Russian collusion. And he puts it in people's heads, and then people indoctrinates people, and then the sycophants, his sycophants go and repeat it and this and that, whatever. And it's like, no, the report is over. They concluded that there's no evidence that there's no Russian collusion. So of course he's going to beat his chest and say, you see, I told you all along I was innocent. I wasn't colluding with the Russians. And people support him. I'm going to say, yeah, he wasn't colluding with the Russians. I mean, this is just insane. Meanwhile, this is the same woman who, in a speech, said when you see a Trump supporter, when you see a Trump cabinet member or a staff member, you should confront them and tell them they're not welcome here. She was on the news to explain that, and I forgot who asked her. They were like, this sounds like harassment. She says it is harassment. It's like, now you are putting it in people's heads and indoctrinating people to actually go out there and harass us and harass people who support our president. So you're actually accusing Trump and his people for the exact same thing that you and your people are doing. I mean, how many Trump supporters are being assaulted and harassed on a daily basis? There's a good chance you walk into an establishment wearing a Trump hat and they don't want to serve you. How many incidents have reached the news already of people assaulted or physically threatened, either verbally threatened or even physically harmed or something, just for having a Trump hat on or supporting the president. So you're actually doing what you're accusing Trump of doing. Now look, the Mueller investigation concluded there's no evidence at all. You think these Democrats will take anything back? You think they'll be man enough to stand up and say, okay, listen, I was wrong? No, they're saying, well, no. I mean, 17 agencies said that there was collusion. It's like, well, what did you do? Would you ask a Democrat who works for the FBI, and he said, yeah, that there's some collusion, and I'm a Democrat, so it's got to be real. It's like, well, who put this report out? Didn't these law enforcement agencies, didn't like the CIA supposedly give wrong information to the Bush administration prior to the Iraqi war? It's like, yeah, they can be wrong. When the news broke about all this, I said the same thing. I was like, it doesn't look so good for Trump, with all these agencies coming out and saying, that he was colluded with the Russians. And then after a little while of digging in further, and I kind of started seeing the hints, that it was bullshit. And I had to admit I was wrong. I thought he was colluding too. I mean, I got fooled by it. It happens. At least I was smart enough not to argue and put all my eggs in one basket, and at least, I was reading up about it and speaking to other people and watching other videos and stuff like that to get my thoughts together on the situation. Now that this collusion thing took way too long for them to conclude that. For a while now I've been saying there is no collusion, and look, we're right. So you think the Democrats would walk that back and admit that they're wrong? They'll never do that. They'll never admit that they're wrong. No way. I mean, they want Trump gone. Now that Nancy Pelosi recently said that there'll be no impeachment because it will be too divisive for the country to impeach him. It's not worth it. And it's like, well, it was worth it right before you knew that the investigation was ending. It was worth it. Now all of a sudden, once you see that it's right around the corner, that the collusion thing is over with, that there is no proof of collusion, now all of a sudden, well, it's just not worth to impeach him. No, it's that there's nothing you can impeach him on. There's no impeachable offense he's committed. You'll never get an impeachment. It just won't happen, other than your sheer hatred for the man. That is the only thing that you have in order to even try to impeach him in the first place. So that's not going to work out so well. I also noticed a lot of Democrats are a little pissed off at Mueller. They're acting like, first of all, he was that knight in shining armor. Now they're like, oh, he must be, he was probably paid off, and all the excuses are coming out. He messed up, and they got to him, and he did a terrible job on the investigation. It's like you were beating your chest when he was first announced as the the lead investigator in the Trump collusion thing, and now when he didn't find any evidence, it's like now all of a sudden you're walking that back, and now he must be a Trump implant or something. The Attorney General now appointed by Trump, William Barr, he has to release the papers for the investigation, and people are saying, oh, he's withholding it, and he was put there by Trump to stop the investigation or to not release anything. It's like, yeah, of course he was put there. He was appointed there by Trump. That's what the president does. So, that's just another failed argument on the left. I mean, they're just all over the place with this nonsense. They don't know how they feel about it. It's at the point that they're just grasping for straws when it comes to having to admit that there's no collusion, Trump didn't do anything wrong, and your threat to democracy, there is no threat. There is no threat to democracy for whatever the hell that means. Screw your democracy. This is a constitutional republic. Trump didn't do anything that harms your democracy. So, that's all they have. They throw that word around. It's a buzzword for them. Throw it around long enough, get other people saying it. You see it all over social media and the media. You see CNN talking about it every night of the week. It's like, what's the weather? It's like, it's cloudy with a chance of rain, and Trump is threatening our democracy, and that's what's on the news, on the Weather Channel at this point in the game with the news media. All they'll talk about is Trump and the conclusion, the collusion with Russia that now, it's just gone. It's over with. It's funny they're not giving the same attention to the report coming out as far as him being, not guilty of collusion as they did with them running around saying he was colluding. Nobody's going to walk it back. No one is going to admit they were wrong. There'll be no apology. There'll be nothing. And now when you speak to them, you're like, hey, remember you said that there was a Trump-Russian collusion? Now that you see that there wasn't any collusion and there was no crime committed, could you admit a couple of things about the president that's good? Could you say something nice? Could you, could you tone down your hatred? Did your hatred, did it come down a few notches? And they'll find some other reason and they'll say something silly like, well, that doesn't mean he didn't do it. It's like, well, yeah, that's exactly what it means. It means he didn't do it. That's why there's no evidence. Oh, he could have done it anyway. He still could have done it. He still could have done it. And they'll go on and on. Well, he could have done it. Prove he didn't do it. It's like, you can't prove he didn't do it. I mean, prove he did it. You can't. They tried the investigation. It's over with. They couldn't prove he did anything. And the Democrats just say, well, prove he didn't. It's like, well, you can't. It doesn't work that way. It's like, prove the tooth fairy doesn't exist. Like, good luck with that one. It's just complete nonsense. Actually, you can prove that the tooth fairy didn't exist because I think there is a historical account of where the idea of a tooth fairy came from. It is a child story, not to get off track, but you know what I meant. I mean, there's other things you can't prove. It's like when I argue with like silly friends or coworkers or people out in the street, people I come into contact with, and I tell them I don't believe in psychics and stuff, and they're like, well, prove psychics are not real. Prove they're not real. It's like I don't have to prove they're not real. You have to prove they are real. It's like that's how it works. You know what I mean? We don't have to prove that Trump didn't collude with the Russians. You have to prove he did, and you can't. And you're still going on and on and on about this Russian collusion thing that they just can't manage to get away from. So, now that that's over, let's move on to the next fuckery. I'm pretty sure they'll just continue with the hate and criticism of Trump until the 2020 election. Now that this came out and they no longer have this as a talking point and as a weapon to use in the primaries, in the general election against him, for 2020, they're going to have to find something else that they could try to throw at him. If he runs on his record alone, he has the best chance of winning. I mean, he has the best record for a U.S. president that we had in a long time. So he's got this one in the bag. I guess they're gonna have to come up with something new for his second term. I'm guessing for the second term, it's like once he's in on the second term, they know that he's gone. After the 4 years, so they might just tone the hate down for a little while because they're realizing that it's leading nowhere, it's going nowhere. They'll just probably continue to take cheap shots at him. The next president, if it happens to be a Democrat, I'm pretty sure what they're going to do is try to ruin his legacy, try to undo everything he's done out of spite, because that's the type of people they are. Unless they're smart enough to not do that and say, well, there's some good policies that came out of him and the economy's doing real well and let's not ruin that. In that case, they'll have to admit that his policies were good and he was a good president. So it's kind of a catch-22 for the Democrats once the ball's back into their court. So we'll see how they play it, but pretty much Maxine Waters is low-hanging fruit, thinker. How she made it this far in her career is beyond me. While people still vote for her to keep her, ahead of that district and keep her as a congresswoman. I mean, I really just can't believe that someone like her can keep her job this long. At this point in the game, seeing people like her and Tlaib and Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and all whose New Deal just got squashed. It was like 0 votes, 0 people voted for her New Deal. I think, what did they say? They said like 57 people said nay, then 43 wrote present or something like that. It's like she got 0 yeses for her Green New Deal. And she was on Twitter saying, well, she told people to write in present. It's like, no, you didn't. You know what I mean? You had a shitty deal that was going to cost, it was like over $90 trillion in 10 years for that deal. It wasn't going to work. Nobody wanted it. All the Republicans said no. All the Democrats that originally said yes, they didn't know what to do. They didn't want to say no because they didn't want to be singled out by you or by anyone. So they didn't know what to say. They didn't want to say yes because they didn't want to look stupid, which they look stupid anyway, but they didn't want to look stupider. So they wrote present to try to save face. And it's like, we see what you're doing, Democrats. It's like, you guys are you're just awful at everything you do. You lost the moral high ground a long time ago, but yet you think we have. And, you just make one stupid error after the next. So, at this point, watching all these people, I don't know why I don't run for Congress, congressman somewhere here in the city of New York, in my district or something. Although I'm not cut out for politics. But then again, I see these people and I'm like, well, if they can do it. I mean, if they could do it, then like me and Rufus here, we could like be... We could be a team. He could be like my campaign manager or something. I mean, you look at him, he looks like a Democrat, right? Because he's a snake. But no, he's actually a conservative libertarian type like me. So, well, that's all I have. Please like, share, subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you on the next video.